Getting into the numbers is always interesting, and today we're diving deep into the world of financial analysis.
Definitely.
We've got some seriously insightful thoughts from a senior financial analyst who really doesn't sugarcoat the challenges businesses face when it comes to understanding their own financial stories.
Right, and it's so easy to get lost in all those spreadsheets.
Exactly. And this analyst gets straight to the point. They call data quality the junk food of financial analysis.
It's true, though. Companies invest in all the latest algorithms, those complex models,
Oh, absolutely.
but they forget about the foundation,
Yeah,
the data itself. You're not going to bake a good cake with rotten eggs, are you?
definitely not. So it's more than just typos we're talking about here. What kind of bad data can really throw a wrench in the works?
Think about it. Outdated sales numbers, departments not on the same page with their reporting.
Okay. Yeah.
Even a tiny mistake, like a misplaced decimal point in a spreadsheet, those little things can turn into big problems, wrong interpretations, and ultimately decisions that could have been way better.
That is a scary thought for sure, especially for those of us making big decisions based on those numbers. So how do you make sure you're not serving up junk food analysis? What's the secret sauce?
Honestly, it's about building a culture that values good data from day one, having really strong validation checks, investing in tools that clean up your data.
Makes sense?
Even something as simple as regular team training can make a huge difference in how accurate your data is.
So it's about creating an environment where everyone's on board with keeping the data clean. Great takeaway. Now, let's move on to a challenge I think a lot of our listeners can probably relate to: data integration. The analysts we talked to actually compared it to herding cats in a digital world.
And they're not wrong. We're dealing with so many different systems, your CRM, ERP systems, marketing platforms.
It's a lot to juggle.
Each one's generating valuable information, but they're all speaking different languages.
So it's like this jumbled mess of useful data scattered all over the place. How do you even start making sense of it?
That's where having a clear plan for data integration is crucial. We're talking about using things like ETL extract, transform, load.
Okay, I've heard of that.
It helps standardize
Yeah.
everything,
Right.
and maybe even building a central data warehouse so everyone's on the same page.
So it's like creating a universal translator for all those different systems.
Exactly.
I like it. But even when the data is clean and organized, there's still the issue of just how much of it there is. The analyst called it drinking from a fire hose, a feeling I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with.
It's true. We're practically drowning in data these days.
It can be overwhelming.
The real skill is being able to swim through all of it and find the insights that really matter.
So how do you avoid getting swept away by the current? Where do you even begin when you're facing that much information?
You have to go back to the basics. What are the big questions you need to answer for your business? Are you trying to figure out pricing, find new customers, reduce churn? Knowing your goals will help you zero in on the data that matters.
It's about being strategic, not just data rich, but insight poor. Love that.
Mm.
Now, this next challenge is one that can make even the most experienced finance people sweat a little. It's what the analyst calls the Gordian knot of financial information, the complexity of it all.
It's true. Understanding financial metrics and ratios is super important here. It's more than just seeing the numbers. You have to get what they represent, how they all fit together, and the story they tell about the company.
Okay, paint me a picture. What are some of the threads we need to untangle in this Gordian knot?
Let's take something like profitability ratios as an example. Things like gross profit margin, operating margin, net profit margin, they all tell a different part of the story about how well a company is making money from what they're doing. Or you've got liquidity ratios like the current ratio or quick ratio. Those give you a peek into how well a company can handle its short-term bills.
So it's like learning a whole new language, but instead of words, it's numbers and ratios.
Yeah, exactly.
And just like any language, fluency takes time and practice. But even when you've got a good grasp on the numbers, there's another layer of complexity. The business world is constantly changing. The analyst had a great way of describing this: trying to hit a moving target blindfolded.
And it feels that way sometimes.
Right.
You can't just rely on what worked in the past, especially in a fast-paced market. Holding on to outdated information means missing out on opportunities or worse.
So how do you hit that moving target? How do you make sure your analysis is still relevant when things are changing so quickly?
You've got to be forward-thinking. This could mean using predictive modeling, scenario planning, even just keeping up with industry trends and making sure you're always factoring in new data.
So it's about being agile, adaptable. Maybe having a crystal ball wouldn't hurt either. All right, for our last challenge in this deep dive on financial analysis, let's talk about technology. The analyst called it a double-edged sword, which I think is something we can all relate to these days.
Couldn't agree more. Technology can be incredibly powerful, but it's not a magic solution on its own.
It's like having a fancy sports car. Doesn't matter how fast it can go if you don't know how to drive it.
Exactly. Having the latest and greatest software doesn't mean you're going to automatically get better analysis.
So what's the key to using technology effectively in the world of financial analysis?
Yeah.
How do we become expert drivers in this data-driven fast lane?
It's all about finding that balance between human expertise and what technology can do. You need people who really know their stuff when it comes to financial data and can understand what those complex tools are telling them.
So investing in training, making sure your team's skills are up to date, and making sure everyone knows how to use the tech to its full potential.
Yes, absolutely.
That makes a lot of sense. But even with the best tools and a really skilled team, there's still one more piece of the puzzle, the human element.
And that's a big one.
It's easy to get caught up in all the fancy algorithms and automation, but at the end of the day, it's still a human who's got to make sense of it all.
Right. It's that gut feeling, the experience you bring to the table that can't be replicated by a computer program.
Exactly. There's that saying, data can tell you what happened, but it takes a human to tell you why it matters. We've talked about a lot today. Good data, integrating your systems, the sheer volume of information out there.
It's a lot to take in, for sure.
It really is. But the message from this analyst isn't all doom and gloom, is it? There's a real sense of empowerment in their words.
Definitely. It can feel overwhelming, no question, especially with how much data's out there these days.
Absolutely.
But when you're able to cut through the noise and find those golden nuggets of insight, it's incredibly rewarding.
It's like solving a puzzle, right? You're piecing together this financial story to understand where a company's strong, where they might be vulnerable, and ultimately what their potential is.
Exactly. And, you know, one of the biggest takeaways for me from all of this is the importance of working together.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether it's data scientists, mentors, even just bouncing ideas off your colleagues, sharing what you know is so important in this field.
It's like building a network, realizing you don't have to have all the answers yourself. Sometimes just talking it out with someone can spark a whole new way of looking at things.
Totally agree. Financial analysis thrives when people share their knowledge and learn from each other. And speaking of learning, this whole conversation has really got me thinking about what the analyst said about coffee being a last resort.
I was just going to say,
Yeah.
that really stuck with me too. What if those coffee breaks, those moments when we step away from the spreadsheets and just let our minds wander, are actually crucial to the process?
It's true. Remember that story about Archimedes? He figures out the whole buoyancy thing while he's taking a bath.
Right. Sometimes you need to step away from the problem to actually solve it.
Exactly. You need that balance. You can't be laser focused on the numbers all the time.
It's about giving your mind some space to breathe, make those connections, get those creative juices flowing, see the bigger picture.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Even in a world driven by data, we can't forget about the power of our own intuition.
Exactly. So, to everyone listening, next time you hit a wall with a tricky analysis, don't be afraid to take a walk, chat with a coworker, maybe grab a coffee. You never know what might spark that aha moment.
Love that. Sometimes the best ideas come when we least expect them.
So true. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of financial analysis for today.
It's been great exploring all these different aspects.
It really has. We've talked about the importance of good data, the challenges of making sense of it all, and the need to adapt in a constantly changing environment. It's more than just numbers on a spreadsheet.
Exactly. It's about understanding the story behind those numbers, figuring out what they really mean for a business.
And on that note of understanding the why behind the what, because at the end of the day, some of the best insights come from sharing ideas and learning from each other.
Couldn't agree more. So until next time, keep those analytical minds sharp, stay curious, and maybe enjoy a coffee break or two while you're at it.
And remember, sometimes the most insightful analysis starts with a single question, a fresh perspective, and maybe, just maybe, a really good cup of coffee. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.